Hey Cozie Homies! Welcome back to the Zone. So I know it's been so long since you have a sit down chit chat session with all of you, but I'm so glad that our first semester in NUS is finally over. Today's video will be a very simple rundown of what modules I've taken this semester, how I feel about these modules, and what I've learned from it basically. And I think because our mod rec, we have to register for our modules very soon, so I'll be sharing with all of you about the different modules I've taken and what's the workload like and what to expect for each module. So let's dive right in. Okay, so for me, I am majoring in PPE, which is Philosophy, Politics and Economics. And that's why I'll be under the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, which has also merged with the Faculty of Science to become this entire College of Humanities and Sciences, CHS. And because of this merger, there are a few CHS mods that all of us have to take if you are a science or arts student. And essentially there are a few of these modules you have to take for the first 2 semesters of our first year, and you'll be allocated to these modules based on your matric number. So if your matric number is an odd number and an even number, you will get a different set of modules altogether. So for me, I'm the odd number batch, and that's why I am allocated these 3 modules from the CHS mods. And the mods that I got allocated are GEA1000, which is Quantitative Reasoning with Data, HSI1000, which is How Science Works, Why Science Works. Also FAS1101, which is Writing Academically. And I believe for the students from the Faculty of Science, they will have also another academic writing module, but it will be different from FAS1101. For our first year in NUS, we cannot overload on our first semester, and that's why we only can take 5 modules, which is 20 modular credits. So the 5 modules I've taken this semester are the 3 that I've mentioned, the common core CHS curriculum modules, which is GEA1000, HSI1000, FAS1101, and also the other 2 remaining modules I've taken are actually the introduction modules to my major. And because I take PPE, Philosophy, Politics and Economics, PPE students will actually be allocated either one of the 3 gateway modules. So for me, I was allocated the Philosophy gateway module, which is GEX1015, also termed as Life, the Universe and Everything. And thus, I have to bid for that one last module, and I decided to take EC1101E, which is the Introduction to Economic Analysis. Okay, so apart from the 5 modules that I've taken, we also have this pass-fail module, which is compulsory for first year NUS students, I believe, which is this Career Readiness module known as HSI1001A, also known as Career Compass 1. Before I explain these modules in detail, most of you who are interested to take these modules can actually go to this nusmods.com website, and over there you actually get to find out all the information that you need. And for me, it's just more of what's my experience with these modules. So yeah, this video is to serve this purpose. When we go to NUS mods, you actually see this secret code of sorts that is just 5 different numbers, and these 5 numbers will actually explain to you the number of hours of workload you will need to spend for these modules. So for example, EC1101E for example, the numbers are 21025. So what these numbers actually mean is that the first number represents the number of hours of lecture, the number of hours of tutorial, number of hours of laboratory work, number of hours of graded work, and lastly, the number of hours of preparation. So actually, because a lot of these common curriculum modules are having a very large cohort of hundreds and maybe thousands of students, so actually a lot of the lectures are pre-recorded at least, and there are also a lot of self-preparation work because you are watching lectures online, so you do more of your own self-prep of sorts. Yeah, maybe I'll share with all of you the common curriculum modules for CHS first before I go into the econs and philosophy module review. Yeah, so first and foremost, let's talk about GEA1000, which is Quantitative Reasoning with Data. The secret code for this module is 2.5.1.5033. So yeah, you will spend quite a lot of hours doing a project. We have a project for GEA1000 and a lot of self-practice, I guess. Lectures are mostly pre-recorded and you can just watch it in your free time basically. Let me break down the grading system for this module. So this module, quizzes form 10%, participation is 15%, the group project is 30%, with a midterm exam which is 15% and a final exam which is 30%. For me, I feel like GEA1000, if you take JC, H1, H2 mathematics, you probably have some sort of experience with statistics. So essentially GEA1000 is more of a statistics module. It teaches you how to look at data, how to reason yourself with data. We look more of the quantitative, qualitative aspects of data analysis, I guess. I would say this module, in terms of the theory, is probably not too difficult, but the questions can be quite tricky sometimes, and especially the quizzes, because the quizzes, right, what they test us is more of the application of our knowledge, not so much on like memorizing cold hard facts. This module, the tutorial is bi-weekly, so you don't have tutorials every week. You can choose to be like a odd week or even week tutorial slots, and each tutorial is like 3 hours long. So yeah. How this tutorial works, right, is that you actually have to do your own homework. They will post like the tutorial questions online. You will do it, and they will go through the questions in class. And usually they will end off the class with an in-class quiz, which is actually quite okay. You just need to get yourself familiarized with like the technical aspects of this module, and you can do fine for the in-class quiz. So just be careful for that. And yeah, just do your work. I feel like GEA1000 is about being consistent. You just gotta put in the hard work to do all the practice questions, and you would do well, I suppose. And one thing about this module is that it actually encourages a lot of like group discussion. So we have this final group project we have to do together, and this group, right, will actually be allocated to you on the very first tutorial slot. So essentially you'll be sitting together with your group mates throughout the entire semester for the tutorials, and also when you're meted to the group project. And in class, you actually get to discuss questions with your tutorial group. So usually my tutor will just let us discuss our questions, and he will randomly pick a group to like present their answers, which I think is not too bad, because I feel like for these modules, different people have different methods of doing the questions, so it's good to learn from each other, and I really appreciate this entire learning process. As for the project is very interesting because this project focuses on like both the theory and the application part of GEA1000. So it's actually like based on like the lecture itself, right? The lecture actually has two parts. There's the theory part and the application part. The application part will actually be learning more about like software skills. So because we're doing like data analysis, so there will be videos explaining to you like how to use Radiant, which is this like R code data analysis software, I suppose. I'm not very sure myself. And also like Excel. Yeah, they do explain to you some of the shortcuts, some of the methods to get what you want, like how to plot a box plot, for example, how to get that best fit line, correlation coefficient, basically all those just statistics kind of stuff. And for the group project, right, there's a part A and part B. So basically for part A of this project, we'll be doing more of the qualitative analysis of like experiments and data. So we'll look more into like study design, look more like hypothesis, how do they actually conduct the studies. So it's more of that aspect. So for part B, we actually get like a sample of data, and we will actually make like visual representations of this data and like draw meaningful conclusions out of it. So you do things like hypothesis testing, you do things like comparing between like the medians, the mode, the average, and yeah, all those statistics concepts. For the midterms and the finals, actually they are MCQ questions. I feel like we usually get ample time to finish those questions, and if you really study beforehand, it should go quite smoothly for you all. But be careful because some of the questions can be a bit tricky, so you gotta read the questions properly. I think the quizzes are the ones that are actually the killers for me, because the quizzes, some of the questions are really difficult. I don't really get them, because for these quizzes they're like unlimited attempts. So for me, usually I'll just keep doing the quizzes and kind of get a sense of like what the questions are like, and I guess you will do better each attempt after you read through the questions and look through your mistakes. So yeah, this is essentially GEA1000, and for me I feel like this module is like a okay module, I guess. I won't say I particularly enjoy it because I'm not really like a statistics, math kind of person, but I do appreciate it for what it is. I think for me, this module actually gave me this new lens to look at data, and you look at like real world articles and like the news and everything. It makes me a bit more sensitive to like the numbers and the data, and to just not take everything for face value. We have to like look deeper and try to see whether this data is it truly representative and reflective of like the real situation. So yeah, it's a good practical skill for all of us to have, I suppose. Next up, let's talk about HSI1000. Okay, HSI1000 is about like scientific inquiry. So how this module works, right, is actually learn more about like, the scientific method. We learn more about like the philosophy of science, I suppose. It's not so much on like science, not so much on like physics, chemistry, biology kind of science, but it's more of like how science works literally. Like how do scientists conduct experiments? How do they actually improve on existing scientific models to explain the scientific phenomena, to explain real world phenomena better? I really like the structure of this module because this module has like 3 blocks. And for block 1, you learn a lot of like practical knowledge about scientific experiments. So you learn about like precision and accuracy, you learn about like confidence intervals, and you also learn about this new very interesting thing called like the baloney toolkit. Essentially trying to like decipher what's real and fake news, trying to see what is science and pseudoscience. Yeah, it's more of that aspect. Block 2 is more about climate change. We learn about how scientists actually come up with different models that explain how the weather has changed for them like thousands of years ago. We learn a lot about the recent discoveries about climate change models, how they actually improve on them. And also we learn about like the Paris Climate Accord, I guess. We learn more about like the climate conferences happening worldwide and what world leaders are trying to do to combat climate change. So we actually learn a bit about like carbon tax, about electric cars, about what are the different methods and innovations that has been coming out for this green economy, green technology for climate change. So block 3 is actually more about ecological connectivity, which is like my favorite block of the 3. We learn about like wildlife. To learn about it in the Singapore context, about like how the government tries to preserve these green spaces, to preserve wildlife while making way for advancements in technology, land use to make buildings, and commercialization of like everything. Yeah, very interesting, and I really learned so much about like the different types of animals, how they move around between green spaces, and it made me realize the importance of keeping a very healthy biodiversity. To preserve our wildlife is really important. This is like I think the biggest takeaway I have from this module. The secret code is 10117, so you can see 7, quite a lot of hours of self-preparation, but it's really fun, I promise you that. Okay, so this is like the assessment breakdown for this module. Quizzes form 10%. Then exploratorium, which is 10%, is kind of like lab sessions. There'll be 2 of such laboratory sessions where you're going to go to the lab and play around with some equipment. There are workshops, 3 workshops that constitute 30%. And the workshops are essentially just tutorials, yeah. Then there are the midterms exams, which is 15%, and the final exam, which is 35%. So there'll be 2 lab sessions and 3 workshop sessions. And each lab session will be 5%, so like 5%, that forms 10%, and the workshop will be 3 times of 10%. After each workshop, you'll be basically given an assessment to do at home, and there's usually like a 1-week deadline to follow. And that assignment, the piece of work that you submit will be 10%. So I think for block 1, the one on like the scientific method, we have to write an essay about like we have to write an essay evaluating the credibility of like a certain news article. So they put some science articles online that may be accurate, may not be accurate, and it's up for us to decide whether or not it's a credible piece. So for the second workshop, right, our assignment is actually to come up with different policies and ideas to make sure that our global rise in temperature stays within the limits that is being imposed by that conference that they had. I can't really remember what conference that was. I think essentially the entire conference says that like the global temperature should not exceed more than 2 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. And what are some of the methods that we can propose that will help keep everything on track to reach this target? And it's a good project. We discussed with our group mates, come up with a report and submit it. Quite fun, but you know, a lot of work. And lastly, the final workshop assignment is probably my favorite because we actually get to go to nature reserves and nature parks in Singapore and conduct a quick observational study. So you just go there, look at animals, look at plants, record down some observations you have, take some photos and write a report, which is so fun, it's really so fun. For the midterm exams and the final exams, there are also MCQ questions and they're open book, so you can just refer to the notes that they have for us. Yeah. So this is HSI1000. I actually enjoyed this module quite a lot actually, more than I actually expect. Okay, next module I'll be talking about will be FAS1101, which is writing academically for arts and humanities. Yeah. And the secret code for this is 12007. So based on the 7, you can tell there's a lot of self-preparation work. I would say FAS1101 probably needs the most preparation compared to all the other modules I've taken this semester. Yeah. And the assessment breakdown for this module would be a research proposal that's 15%, an overview essay that's 25%, a final essay that's 45%, and a class participation which is 15%. So out of all these modules, this is the only module that doesn't have a final exam. But because there's no final exam, there'll be a lot of continual assessment that is pretty like heavy in terms of like the weighting of grades. So how this module actually works, right, is that they actually give you a few content packages where there are like a few topics that they zoom in on, and you actually get to read some articles, watch some additional enrichment lecture videos that explain more about these content packages, and you basically have to choose one of the content packages that you're very interested in, formulate a good essay question, and submit a research proposal to tell your tutor what topic you're interested to do research in. And after that, this whole semester is basically just like keep writing, keep finding sources, learning more about the subject matter you're writing about, and write a good cohesive piece of academic writing and submit it to your teacher. I'm not very sure whether or not the content packages will change throughout the next few semesters, but for me, I chose one on social linguistics, and I chose that because it's totally not related to what I'm studying, so I feel like I'm gonna learn something more from this module. So I wrote on social linguistics, I wrote an essay about Singlish, which is Singapore colloquial English. I had so much fun researching about it actually, learning about like the origins of some of the very uniquely local words that we use, and the way we talk, our intonation, our pronunciation is actually influenced by a lot of cultural influences. So yeah, this requires a lot of work because like you have completely zero background knowledge on this, and you just have to keep reading, keep finding sources. I've been to like the library many times just to get like academic journals and just to read more about this aspect of social linguistics. Yeah, I feel like actually I did enjoy the process of researching. I feel like I enjoyed researching more than I actually expected. But the process of writing is really difficult because I think most of us wouldn't have a lot of knowledge and experience for like proper academic writing that like university standards are like looking for. So yeah, for me it's more of like trial and error, learning more about citation styles, learning more about how to write in a more formal way. I feel like the way I write sometimes can be quite colloquial, so it's like trying to change that tone, trying to write sound more professional when I write. And I think that's the biggest takeaway I have from this module. And I really had so much fun in this module, just that the workload can be quite intense. Yeah. Okay, next let's talk about EC1101E, Introduction to Economic Analysis. The secret code for this module is 21025. Yes, so there are physical lectures for this module, there are physical tutorials every week, and lots of homework. Okay, let me talk about the assessment breakdown for this module. So weekly quizzes form 10% of this grade. There will be problem sets, which is basically submitting your homework, is 5% of the grade. Then tutorial participation, 10%. Midterm exams, 25%. And final exams is 50%. As you can tell, this module focuses grading more on the examinations because like the final exam, the midterm exam combined forms 75% of this grade. So we have to work really hard to make sure that you don't mess up during the exams. I think this is like the biggest strategy we have for this module. So yeah, weekly quizzes form 10%. The weekly quizzes are actually quite reflective of the final and midterms exams, I would say. Yeah, like if you actually do the quizzes properly, you review your mistakes, actually I think it helps a lot with the examinations. The problem sets are quite interesting because the problem sets, they actually cover topics that are briefly mentioned in the lecture, but they go more in depth, and it allows us to really appreciate more of like the economic analysis and like what are some of the gaps and loopholes that we have in the existing models that are being used to explain economic phenomena. And how this module works, right, is that for economics, there's like microeconomics and macroeconomics. So the first half of this semester focuses more on the micro aspect, the second half of this semester focuses more on the macro aspect. So for me, I've taken economics in JC back years ago. So I took history economics, and I think for microecons, right, it's actually quite similar to the microeconomics I've learned in JC for the A levels. It's roughly the same, probably with a few new ideas, new concepts like cost theorem, maybe like tragedy of the commons. I think that's quite different. Yeah, they introduce a bit more of like math. Yeah, because I feel like in the JC system, right, the way they test economics is more like writing essays. But for uni econs, it's more of like they focus on math, focus on algebra, on calculus to explain how these models work. But for macroeconomics, it's very different from what we have learned in JC. I feel like it's actually an entire new perspective I have from macroeconomics, even though like the same things apply, like monetary policy, fiscal policy. Yeah, these terms are still familiar, but the way they explain it is so different. We learn more about the classical model, the Keynesian model, and basically like how like the macroeconomy changes, how about they react in the short run, in the long run. Yeah, learn more about exchange rate, interest rate, economic indicators, like how do we know like GDP, inflation rate. So if you're really interested in these kind of things, just take the module, it'll be quite fun for you. But I have to highlight, right, that this module, the professors pride themselves in like the rigor they set up for this module. So this is really not for the faint-hearted. I feel like this module, right, I spent a lot of time trying to understand like the concepts behind the topics mentioned in lecture. Because like the lecture, I feel like they mention a lot of concepts, a lot of random topics and ideas in the lecture, but sometimes I don't really quite get it on my initial listen, so I always go to like So I always go on like YouTube or something, or like just go online, find more articles and try to understand better some of these concepts. And I feel like actually understanding these concepts helps a lot for the exams also, because there's this very huge like time pressure during the exams. I feel like there's always not enough time for me to complete the questions. So having a very good grasp of the content, having a very good understanding, I guess it would help to increase your speed and help to increase your accuracy in terms of choosing the answers. Yeah, it's a MCQ, MRQ, like multiple choice, multiple response questions, a good mix of them in our examinations. I think the best advice I can give to anyone taking this module is that just make sure you know your stuff very well. It really helps in the long run. Yeah. Okay, and the final module that we're talking about will be GEX1015, Life, the Universe and Everything, which is also the introduction module to philosophy. The secret code for this module is 21007. Yeah, so also a lot of self-preparation, which comes from like reading, a lot of readings for this module. And the assessment breakdown for this module is actually weekly quizzes that form 40%, your attendance forms 10%, participation forms 10%, and your final exam forms 40%. So this module has a very heavy emphasis on quizzes, because it's weekly quizzes, right? And for like 10 weeks, so each quiz is like 4% of your grade, which is quite substantial. Okay, so how this module works, right, is that actually every week there'll be a different topic in philosophy that will be discussed in lecture. And there will also be like required weekly readings that comes together with the lecture. And the readings, I feel like you have to read the readings because everything that's covered in lecture is actually very closely related to what we have learned in the readings as well. How this module works, right, is that the lecturer actually goes through different topics under the different major fields of philosophy. So I think we spend a huge bulk of our time going through topics in moral philosophy. We also learn a lot about like epistemology, a bit of metaphysics, just some applied philosophy. So some of the applied philosophy concepts I think are quite interesting. It'll be this entire lecture for that week that talks about eating meat. So we learned about, is it morally right or wrong for us to eat factory produced meat? I think it's a very interesting debate because for me, I've been vegetarian for many years, and it's very interesting to hear like the for and the against, like the pros and cons of like consuming factory made meat based on a philosophical point of view. We learned about so many different things. We learned about like normative ethics. We learned about what's good and bad, what's right and wrong. We learned about things like, does God exist? We also learned things like, do we have free will? Is our self enduring? We also learn a lot of consciousness. Yeah, like how do you know you're conscious? Yeah, a lot of interesting topics. So for the weekly quizzes, right, they will actually test us on the content that's being covered in the lecture for the week. The way this quiz is being done is very interesting. It's all multiple response questions, and the professor will actually upload the questions online for all of us to discuss with our friends. And after we discuss with our friends, we come together and we will just submit our answers together. And surprisingly enough, everyone is very divided about the answers all the time, because I guess it's philosophy, right? So many people have like different interpretations of like the questions and what they think is the right answer. But I think how the questions are formulated is trying to like test on our ability to sieve out a good argument for us to be able to come up with like, it's really to train us to think logically. I feel like logic plays a very huge role in philosophy. And I feel like if we are able to convince ourselves, to convince all our friends that whatever answers we chose is the most logical and the most reasonable, I guess most people will just choose those answers and submit them together. Yeah, but I really have so much fun doing these weekly discussions for the quizzes, because I feel like when we discuss the quiz questions, right, it really allows us to have a very good recap for what I've learned in the lecture. And different people have different ideas. It's so fun to listen to different people argue about their ideas. The final exam is essentially just like a weekly quiz but with like many more questions. And for the tutorials in this module, it's also just another round of like discussions. Our tutor will usually start off the tutorial with like a quick summary of what I've learned in the lecture, and our classmates will just share their ideas, and everyone will just try to contribute actively to what you have learned and our insights regarding to this topic. Yeah, that's philosophy. I had so much fun with this module. So yeah, this is just the general overview of the modules I've taken this semester. I know that a lot of details I didn't touch, I didn't cover, but if you have any questions, any queries, feel free to comment down below. I'll be very willing to answer all of them. And yeah, because mod is coming so soon, I wish all of you all the best to get all the modules you want. And if you're not sure about what modules to take, you can watch this video and see if any of these modules interest you. And if you are taking these modules as compulsory modules, at least you know what to expect. And yeah, that's all for today. And if you liked today's video, do remember to like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!